So Sue, what defines debt as a problem? Is there an actual amount, or is there a type of debt that classifies a problem, or is it just how debt affects an individual?
I think firstly what we need to do is put that whole question really into perspective, because debt, I mean, I would actually say that all of the households in the UK today have some form of debt. It doesn't necessarily follow that because you have debt that you have a debt problem. And I think that, again, just to explain that, I mean, a mortgage, car finance, and indeed most of our utility bills, are paid on some form of credit. So I think just wanted to clear that really in the first instance. A debt problem, I mean, in a simple phrase, perhaps I can sort of define that as being just inability to pay. So it's when you can't afford to pay that debt that we know that you've got a debt problem and that you should really be seeking some form of advice. And typically, I mean, I've obviously talked to lots of people who have recognised that they've got a debt problem, and typically what we see is that it takes a long time for them to realise that they've got the debt problem, but the types of things that make people sit back and realise that they have the debt problem are things like maxing out constantly on your credit cards, constantly dipping into your overdraft facility in your bank account. What follows from that perhaps is that your income every month, and the majority, if not all of it, is actually being used to pay historic debt repayments, then leaving you in a position where the current month you're then using revolving credit to pay for your everyday living costs. And I think as well when somebody realises or actually that don't know how much debt they actually have, and then I think you that's sort of synonymous with losing control of the whole situation. So again, I think, just to follow from that, I think the inability to pay, the message from that is that debt can be of any size. If you can't afford to pay £100 bill, if you can't afford to pay a £5,000 credit card bill, it's all equally a debt problem.
Is there, in terms of circumstances then, we've obviously seen changes in the economy and that's a decline. Can we put our debt problem down to the economy? Is it down to our own personal circumstances, or is it often just a case of bad luck?
To be fair, I think in a lot of cases, it can be a combination of all, or it can be any one of those factors that actually give rise to the debt problem. I mean, just to break down the sort of areas that you've highlighted, I mean, the economy. I mean, what we've seen typically with the economy is the effect that that's having on people's jobs. People are losing their jobs. If they're fortunate enough to keep their jobs, typically what we're seeing is that they're having their overtime cut. And when you've relied on a certain level of income, just a small cut in overtime and the ability to earn that extra money can have a massive impact on your finances. We talk about bad luck. Well, again, redundancy, losing your job also falls into that category. We see people who perhaps have accidents or suffer with ill health, and that in itself can then result in a reduction in income. Again, it all impacts on your ability to manage your finances. In terms of lack of planning, and I don't see that necessarily as being a failure on anybody's part. I mean, I personally was made redundant and hadn't planned for being made redundant, like most people. And I found that in itself, was a problem because I didn't have enough savings, for instance, to actually see me through a realistic period of time to be able to secure new employment. Lack of planning, again, can quite simply come down to not perhaps appreciating the financial burden involved with perhaps having a baby. Growing family, that can also impact on your finances. And what we're also seeing is a lot of people not perhaps planning adequately for retirement. And a lot of the older generation wanting to do the most they can for their children, for their grandchildren, and perhaps spending a little bit too much in the run-up to retirement, but then not being able to have enough time to claw back their finances to be able to manage their own outgoings and commitments. So I think that's just to give an indication of the types of things that can affect any individual, you and I included, and that can then result in there being a debt problem.
I think I can empathise with that because my own circumstances were, I had a kind of a good income coming in, and I kind of enjoyed that, and then circumstances happened that I lost a major client, and pretty much 50% of my income had disappeared, and suddenly realised I hadn't kind of planned for that. I didn't really appreciate how much debt I was actually holding, and I think one of the things that first kind of hit me emotionally was, well, have I failed? Now, while I obviously have to take responsibility for my circumstances, it's very, and I hope certainly that our kind of viewers are not holding on to this, that you've not actually done something wrong. You might not be managing the process and managing the kind of your money in a particularly good way, but it's not a failure in you as a person, and ultimately there's solutions that are available, and the first step is actually about getting advice and seeing what you can do and to get out of that situation.
Absolutely, and I absolutely agree that it's not in any way indicative of anybody's failure. It can happen to any one of us. Just a change in circumstances can suddenly take you into that arena, that you begin to struggle to meet your debt repayments. Unfortunately, it can happen to any one of us.
Hi, it's Darren Hughes, creator of DebtAdviceTV.com. As someone who spent a considerable amount of time under the overwhelming pressure and burden of debt, with quite severe anxiety and stress that went through it, one of my biggest regrets was that I didn't seek professional advice early enough. That's why I created Debt Advice TV, so that you can have access to not only great professionals who can offer you good advice, but also understand and care about finding the right help and solutions for you. The video that you've just watched is just one of many videos available at www.debtadvicetv.com. If you want access to the rest of those videos and have the ability to ask those professionals questions, leave comments, and interact with getting great advice, then simply just click on debtadvicetv.com in the link in the description underneath this video here now. It'll take you to the registration page where we just ask for your name and an email address just to make sure that you're real. The professionals at debtadvicetv.com are all highly qualified, and more importantly, they care. They understand what you're going through and are there to help you to find the right solution that's available to you. So if you are ready, then you can actually give us a call. You can call us now on 0808 168 9038 and you can speak to one of the team. Thanks so much for watching this video and subscribing to Debt Advice TV's YouTube channel. Take care, but always take action.